Hey, how you doing? It's Clayton here from howtodrawcomics.net and welcome to another comic art tutorial. In this video, we will be working on a brand new character for Renegade Alpha, my upcoming comic book series. This character is named Beretta. She's a chick. She's going to be a female character, one of the first in the cast of characters that I will be creating for this book. And she was a really fun character to design. I love drawing women. I love drawing men as well. I love drawing creatures and monsters. I mean, look, I like the whole spectrum of different characters that are out there. But for me, when it comes to drawing women, they have a certain amount of smooth flowing gesture and energy within the lines that are laid down to define their figure. And I love the sense of movement that I'm able to incorporate into them. They're elegant, they're sleek. Now, Beretta here, she's a badass, obviously, as are many of my female characters, but she's a badass with a little bit of sexiness woven into her. I love to draw strong, powerful-looking women that look absolutely gorgeous, that look attractive, that look alluring. They're easy on the eyes, and Beretta is no exception from that. She's a smooth talker, a sharp shooter, and knows how to kick serious alien butt on the field. Now, for those of you who don't know what Renegade Alpha is, you have no idea what the premise of the story involves, well, let me explain it to you very briefly here, because we have already talked about it in the demonstration that I did up for Commander Slug, who leads the team of rebels that Beretta is a part of. So Renegade Alpha is set in a post-apocalyptic world picked to the bone by alien invaders that have enslaved most of humanity for their own means. Now, the bad news is for us humans is that these aliens go from one planet to the next, breeding with the dominant species of that planet in an effort to evolve, in an effort to push the evolution of their own species in a more powerful direction. They want to enhance their species. They want to become a stronger, more powerful, elite race. And this is their strategy for doing it. And of course, when it comes to Earth, well, the dominant species here, as we all know, is the human race. So they got their target set on us. They have essentially taken all the men that they can find, enslave them in one way or another, using them for entertainment, or just, as a working force to build their structures, so they essentially don't have to do it. They use them for experimentation, both men and women alike. But, unfortunately for the ladies, well, these aliens, they use them as incubators for their alien-human hybrids, and it's an unfortunate situation. One of the reasons as to why the human rebellion within this comic book is so angry, why they are striking back with such force and trying their darndest to eradicate the alien scum that has taken over Earth. And in the first issue of Renegade Alpha, well, they are going in for a rescue mission. They're trying to save one of their own men who has been captured by the aliens and is in the process of being experimented on, as I said. Now, they are trying to turn this particular soldier that they're going in to rescue into an alien hybrid known as a splicer. Now, the bad news there is that these splicers are able to wreak massive amounts of carnage on the human populations that are scattered about the planet that are struggling to survive as it is. These splicers know exactly, being, of course, captured soldiers of the rebellion. They know exactly where these human civilizations reside, so they are able to hone in on and target and absolutely just annihilate everyone who is part of that human colony. So, the mission here for Commander Slug and his team, including Beretta, is to go in and either rescue the man that has been captured, their comrade, or eliminate him if it's too late. If he has been indeed turned into a full-blown splicer, they have no choice but to terminate him. So, they're hoping for the best, but they can only do so much if it is too late. Now, as to whether or not they are able to save him, well, we'll have to wait and see. I don't want to give away too many spoilers. People keep telling me, Clayton, you got to stop giving away spoilers to your book. So I'm going to try to resist the temptation to do that. But now that I've explained a little bit of the backstory, let's get into the drawing process here and talk about what's happening on the screen in front of you. Now, so far, I have done my darndest to come up with a solid foundation for the character sheet that I'm featuring Beretta's concept on. So you can see I've got a primary beauty shot of her presented from the 3/4 angle. We get a good look at her full body design. And then over to the right-hand side of that character sheet, I've got some close-up shots of her head from various viewpoints, a shot from the back, and then another kind of more illustrative representation of her that shows the character in a dynamic pose, where we're looking up at her from the side, kind of 3/4 direction somewhat, at least of her head there, just trying to get a different perspective on the character. Now, I later throw that out and opt for a side view shot of her instead. I change around the composition just a little bit to make sure the presentation is on point, but now that that foundation is down and ready to go, I am able to use it as a blueprint to sketch a more refined version of her anatomy over the top. And it's important to put the time and the effort in here to make sure that her anatomy is shaped and structured with complete accuracy, at least as accurately as I can possibly get it before I move on to the actual design phase of the character concept. Because if the anatomy is off and I am dressing her figure up with all of those design elements, the costuming and what have you, well, it means that essentially the entire design is going to have flaws riddled throughout it, and that is something that I want to avoid at all costs because, I'm committing a lot of time and effort here. It's going to take a while, a good 8 hours, in fact, real time, in order to complete this concept. So I want to make sure that I am working atop a very sturdy base, a solid foundation, before I start really committing to the details and rendering everything out. So this is an important point within the process. I guess it would be almost the pre-production phase of the concept, even though concept art is the pre-production phase of the entire comic book. So it does look simple. It's very, very rough. It is not 100% polished line work by any means, but I am making sure that regardless of it, I really am conscious of whether or not the pose is balanced correctly so that it doesn't look like she's going to topple over if she stands in that position too long. I want to make sure that the proportions are measured out correctly. The proportions, they make me nervous, I'm not going to lie. Proportions are one of those things that you have to double check again and again in order to make sure that they are 100% accurate. And every character is going to have different proportions. For me, as an example, I like to give my ladies some longer, more sleek legs. I find that it gives somewhat of an elegant aesthetic to the character. Long legs, you'll see a lot of models on the catwalk. In fact, one of the reasons as to why they are picked are for their height. And a lot of the time, their height comes from their legs. Short people are usually they normally have a normal length torso, but it's their legs that, make them shorter. So when it comes to a character such as this that is exceptionally idealized, standing at a good 8 heads high, I do tend to give them longer legs. Again, it just makes them look more beautiful, more elegant, and it's all biology, baby, a lot of the time. If you look at the ample bosom that I have given Beretta here, well, again, that makes her look more appealing. It does make her look sexy, and I want that for this character. Some people, they're not a fan of sexy characters. They don't think that that's a good thing. I beg to differ. And I like beautiful-looking women as much as I like handsome-looking, badass male characters. You'll notice that if you cross-reference Beretta here, in comparison with Commander Slug, that he is just as buff and idealized as she is. I mean, she's not anywhere near as buff as Commander Slug, but you get the idea. She's just as attractive in an equivalent manner as Commander Slug is, and he's an old dude, but he's keeping fit. He's staying in shape. He's got it because in this brave new world in which Renegade Alpha is set, it is survival of the fittest. They have got to be strong. They have got to be powerful if they have any hope of surviving at all. Any one of them could be captured by the alien scum, so they've got to be able to hold their own, and Beretta indeed can hold her own. She is beautiful, she is sexy, but make no mistake, she is one tough tiger. I wouldn't mess with her, that's for sure. So you can see here that I'm trying to dress her up. Now that I've got that anatomy figured out, it's done, it's dusted, it is cemented in stone. I can work over the top of it, feeling confident enough that everything that I do draw over the top is going to be sound, is going to fit around the body correctly, and that body that I am dressing up is all proportional, all accurate, that it's in the pose that I want it to be in, and that the anatomy is also structured as correctly as I can possibly get it. But now that that's done, I can start to focus in on, what kind of clothing elements am I going to give Beretta here? Now I did do a very rough, very basic-looking thumbnail sketch for Beretta before I went into this finalized presentation of her character sheet. So I've got a little bit of an idea as to what the primary elements are going to be, and what's going to be present within her design. I just don't know what kind of details they will entail, and so that's the process that I'm going through now. So I'm knocking out the different elements that I want her costuming to have, and you can see that there's a lot of military gear that I'm including within her outfit. You can see these pouches around the midsection. Now, people have asked me, well, how does she get the items out of those pockets when her boobs are sitting right on top of them? Well, it's not that difficult. She is still able to retrieve ammo, the various tools, the supplies, the rations, whatever she's got hiding away inside those pouches. Her boobs aren't that much of a problem. She's able to retrieve those items fairly easily. So don't worry about that. Other people have also pointed out the fact that it would significantly cause her maneuverability to be held back within that region of her body. Again, I beg to differ. A lot of the time when you see combat vests, the pouches are situated at about the midsection of the person's body, and so I don't think that's much of a problem either. You can see that they're strapped on there. They are not made of a hard armored type material, so there is some room for flexibility. And you'll also notice that they're wrapped around the top half of her torso, so still around the rib cage, which means the flexible midsection of her body does still have a fair amount of movement that it is capable of, regardless of the fact that these pouches are indeed strapped around her torso. Then you'll notice that I'm adding in these straps that run down and into her crotch. I think that's, that accentuates the form of the female male figure here. It makes her look more sexually appealing. Again, I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't know why it is frowned upon. I really don't, and I'm not trying to be naive there, but I think that people like to see sexy-looking characters. I know that I do, and I know that it sells really, really well for a reason. So, I mean, each to their own. There is a certain balance of practicality and coolness that I am trying to strike here. Yes, this costume that I am giving Beretta isn't all practical whatsoever. There are flaws definitely within it in regards to functionality, but I will tell you that in terms of coolness, she's really packing a lot of that. You've got to keep in mind the rule of cool, and the rule of cool simply states that if it looks good enough, if people are going to be drawn to it, if it's attractive, if people dig it, then it doesn't matter so much as to whether it's unrealistic or realistic for that matter. It just matters that it looks cool, and if it looks cool enough, people will tend to ignore the practical flaws that may be present within that design. Now, you can't go all gung-ho on the unrealistic aspects of a design. Look, there does still have to be some realism there. As long as it looks as though it could work somewhat, you'll pretty much be good to go, however. So you can see me giving her a gun holster here. She's got a sidearm. That always looks cool. Now, what I'm trying to do is, even though there are some areas of this character's body that is exposed, such as, the top chest area, the arms, and then she's going to have some fairly skin-tight pants that also hug against her underlying anatomy fairly tightly. I'm trying to give her some bulkier assets as well to make the silhouette of the overall design actually look pretty interesting and unique. And I find that there's a certain amount of contrast that I'm able to implement as well by doing that. And as we all know, contrast within a character design is going to do you so many favors. It gives you that visual rhythm within the character that people are just drawn to. They love to see contrast, not only in terms of the shape of the silhouette like we're talking about here with Beretta, but also in terms of the different values that are going to be at play when we start to render that character out, when we start to color her up. And even though you can't see that to a huge extent, I can tell you that I have kept that in mind. That is something that was present within that very basic preliminary thumbnail that I drew up, that I whipped up for Beretta. So yeah, I mean, all of that is kept in mind. I love contrast, and I try to make it a point to inject it into my designs wherever I can. So her boots are going to be another bulky costume asset. I want them to be big. I want them to stand out against the skin-tight pants that I have given her. And again, you're looking at the shape within the character design, the different shapes that you're dealing with, and you're trying to play them off of one another, while at the same time ensuring that they all fit together. There should be a certain architecture that ties the design together, the commonalities that all of these different elements have within them, and you want them to repeat throughout the design. So just as an example, and it's a very little example, but you will notice that there's 3 little dots on the front of either one of her knee pads there. And you'll notice that those same dots reoccur on the armored portion of the collar around the sides of her neck that I have given her. Okay, so again, that's a reoccurring detail element that I'm including in her design, and it just creates a little bit of harmony within it. It's important to have. You want to make sure that every single thing you're including within the design, even though it may be separate, goes together, like it's part of the costume. It belongs together. Everything needs to jibe well. If it doesn't, then that's when you're going to get inconsistencies. It's going to throw people off. They're going to be like, well, that doesn't make any sense. And, there is probably a lot of aspects of this design that if you look at it carefully and, maybe you're a connoisseur of military gear and there are some inconsistencies that are making you scratch your head as you look at this design. But again, the thing is, it doesn't have to be all accurate. It shouldn't be all inaccurate, but as long as it looks as though it could work, that's the main thing. That's what I always try to keep in mind. So, never let the idea of practicality outweigh the visual representation of your character and its appeal. Because appeal should always be at the top of your list of priorities when it comes to designing a character. Comic book characters especially, because as we all know, comic books are a visual medium. You might have a character that is very, very functional, very, very practical, but hey, if it doesn't look cool, people aren't going to really care about it. It's going to appear boring. So, if you've got the option of choosing between a practical, boring-looking character and then a cool-looking, non-functional character, just go for the cool-looking, non-functional character. It's fine. People will forgive you in that regard, but they will not forgive you for a boring-looking design. It is just the way that things are. A lot of the time when we're thinking about everyday reality and, the practicalities that involves, yes, sure, you can bring that over into the fantastic themes oftentimes that you're dealing with in comic books, but don't bring it over too much. You still do want things that are a little bit bigger than life, that are a little bit more out there when it comes to comic book characters and even the stories in which they partake. Because that's the whole reason as to why comic books are so fun. And here we go. We've got some more pouches happening, not only around the bottom of her calf on the right hand, on the left hand side of her body as we're looking at her, but also on the right hand upper thigh. So I'm trying to include a lot of different shapes here. A lot of people have said that, Clayton, look, man, you're going to regret putting in all these pouches because you're going to have to redraw this chick over and over again from one panel to the next in Renegade Alpha. And you know what? I don't have a problem with that. I think that it's totally worth it for the way in which her design panned out, and I could not be happier. She has been a hit, got a really, really good response on the various social media outlets that I released her on. She's probably one of the most popular characters that I've ever designed in that regard. So, I like to put my characters out there just to see whether or not people buy it, to see what kind of reaction the audience is going to have. I'm making this comic book for the people, right? So it's important that they like it. I'm giving it to them. It's something that I want to share with them, that I want them to enjoy. So if they don't like it, then there's really no point in doing this comic book at all. So I like to tell people a little bit about the backstory. Now, I will admit here that Beretta doesn't have a super deep and profound backstory. That still has a little bit more development to go. But, I've got a basic idea of who she is, and that comes through in the visual representation that I have opted for here in her concept sketch. This pose exudes confidence. It tells you that this chick is very, very sure of herself. And that's something that is at the primary attribute that I want Beretta to have. Now, I'm messing around with her hairstyle here. I want a long flowing hairstyle. Someone suggested that I should tie it back in a ponytail. That'd be more realistic. And maybe it would be, but I just find that having a long flowing hair down the back of the character that's swooping out to the side is simply majestic. I love to include those types of elements within the design. I feel as though it ups the ante as far as the amount of energy I'm able to pump into them goes. So, it's long flowing hair is something that I'm going for there. And also to make her design just that little bit more unique, to push it somewhat further, I'm giving her some aviators, some aviator sunnies that she's going to be wearing. I'm thinking of tinting them blue, giving her orange hair, and maybe making those tights that she's wearing around her legs blue as well, just to fit in with the glasses. I'm thinking about all this stuff. Even before I finish the sketch here, it's important to consider what is the finished vision of your character going to be? How are they going to act within the comic book? What are the kind of things that they're going to say? I love to imagine myself being in a room with these characters and just, experiencing them, communicating with them, talking to them, and asking myself, well, if I'm in the presence of that character, how should that presence be presented in the finished comic book, on the page? It's important that that presence comes across to the reader, that it is communicated clearly. You want a character to have a darn soul. You don't want them to just be an empty husk. You don't want them to be someone acting like that character. You want them to be that character. That attitude must come through on the page, because that's exactly what the reader is going to connect with. And the more that you are able to get it to come across, the more potently that connection is going to be between the character and the reader. And when you can create a connection like that, let me tell you, it is going to be something that stays with your audience. It will make them invested. And when they're invested, it means that they're going to be looking forward to the next issue, that they're going to read it, and that they're going to become an avid fan of the property that you're creating for them. So it's something to think about. It's very important to think about, and something that I'm always conscious of when I'm designing these characters. So the thing is I know that she's going to have pouches that are wrapping around her midsection, her legs there. I know that she's going to have knee pads and that kind of thing. The way in which I understand visually a knee pad and a pouch as being is, I understand it in a general way. There is a certain vaguity, however, to the information that I have stored about it in my consciousness. So in order to knock out these details, to ensure that indeed I have represented all of those elements as accurately as I possibly can on the page, I've got to make sure that I got some reference material, some real-world reference material for those elements available to me. So, I use reference material. I use a ton of it, in fact, to ensure the utmost accuracy within my designs. But here's the thing. When I'm using reference material, I'm not creating a carbon copy of an entire character. I'm slapping that character to get there. I'm putting that character design together in my own way. Of course, all of those elements are composed, and it's up to me as to how they all fit together. But the thing is that each one of those individual elements, they do need to have a certain amount of realism associated to them, so that when the audience looks at the military pouch or the gun holster, they understand it as being indeed a military pouch or gun holster, as an example. So, and I do have to make sure that they all kind of function in the same way, that they all serve the same purpose for those elements to work, because they are based indeed on real-world elements. But as I said, the way in which they all fit together into the design, the way in which they are composed, that's completely up to me. I can use as much creative liberty in that regard as I want to. So yeah, that's something to think about when it comes to reference material. Always make sure that you are using reference material in the context of your idea and not the other way around. You do not want to be confining your imagination to just the reference material that you have available to you. That is being stuck in a box of observation, and being confined to observation alone is simply not something which is going to serve you as a designer, because your creativity will be limited in that regard. So I changed up her hairdo a little bit, made it more flowy, bigger in general. Big hair is something that was very present within the 90s image comic book scene. And so I am trying to mimic that to an extent. I love that era of comic books. Even the theme of the story surrounding Renegade Alpha is very 90s, very late 80s at heart. So again, I'm always trying to make sure that wherever I can, I'm upholding that general theme that I'm trying to have present throughout the book. I love it. The reason that I wanted to create this comic book is so that I wouldn't be bored drawing it. And so, I want to make sure that the content I am drawing, the information that I'm including in these characters, the way in which they're designed, the general, I would call it a visual theme, I guess, but just the whole vibe from the 80s and the early 90s is something that I know I am going to enjoy so much when it comes to putting this book together. And the fact that I've been able to weave some of the common attributes within these characters that you would have seen in characters from the 90s is, I know that that's going to allow me to be able to do that. I could have come up with a more complicated, unique story. I get that. And maybe Renegade Alpha is fairly generic. It's been seen, it's been done before, and maybe I'm putting a little bit of a spin on it, but hey, the story still seems cool to me. Cliche has never been a bad thing in my eyes. It just means that the idea works, that it has worked before. It's a proven idea. And so I think sometimes the simplest ideas are the best ideas. The more complicated and convoluted you get with a concept, it tends to be more difficult for the reader to actually properly understand. And so, in my humble opinion, I think that sometimes you got to take a step back. How simple can you possibly make your story, your characters, and the idea in general? Because the chances are that the more simple it is, the easier it's going to be able to get for people to get, rather. And when people get it, when they don't have to work to try and understand what it is you're feeding them in terms of story, the more that they are able to let themselves enjoy it. We don't want to have to work to try and understand a complex idea. We want it handed to us on a platter most of the time. Most people do. Look, don't get me wrong. I'm the kind of person who likes to have a little bit of depth to the stories that I read and the movies that I watch. That's the kind of person I am. But a lot of people don't really like David Lynch movies. A majority of people don't like David Lynch movies. I try to tell my friends about David Lynch movies, some of the classics like Lost Highway, which I love, Mulholland Drive, and they never get it. I'm always looking at these movies on a much more deeper level and coming to my own conclusions, but I'm not trying to create a David Lynch comic book here. I want to make something that's simple, that's easy to understand, that has a few surprises along the way. But I think some of the appeal and allure that this book is going to have, that Renegade Alpha will have within it, is just the fact that people do understand and relate with, alien invaders, that they relate with the Marines, the rebel human alliance that has formed in order to take back and fight back against the alien scum. People love that stuff. It never gets old. If I could watch more movies that are like Terminator, more movies that are like RoboCop or Aliens, If there were different movies out there that were kind of like those movies, man, I'd be onto that in a minute, right? So, that's why I'm creating a comic book like that kind of, runs in the same realm as those titles I just mentioned, because I love that stuff and I know that I'm going to love drawing it as well. And hopefully others will love reading it. Let me know what you think in the comments below. What do you think of Beretta here? What do you think of the premise of Renegade Alpha? Heck, what do you think of the name of Renegade Alpha? There's been some contention on the title I have given this book, but it will come to light, as I said, the reason as to why I have opted for Renegade Alpha. Because it's, in some ways, it's very, very suitable in multiple meanings. So, now that I've done the full-blown three-quarter concept for Beretta, I like to call these the beauty shot, I have decided to take my focus over to a few close-up headshots. You can see this one from the front. It's important that you have an intimate understanding of your character from multiple points of view, not only for you, but also for the artist that is going to be working with that character, the interior artist. Now, if you're doing a character sheet for a video game or a movie, well, the same thing applies. Whoever is going to be working off this character sheet, yourself included, needs to be able to use it as a solid reference that they can refer back to in order to make sure that there is a certain amount of consistency within the re-representations of that character as they're drawn throughout the visual narrative. And so this is the purpose of a character sheet. This is why we go to the trouble of making one. If we didn't have it there, well, we would be guessing a lot of the time. We'd be forgetting certain details that we needed to include within the character in order to make sure that that continuity was there within their visual appearance. And a lot of the time, sometimes you will see that. The artist may accidentally, even if they have got a solid understanding of the character design, leave out a particular element. That has happened to me as well, by the way. So I'm trying to be as comprehensive as possible as I represent Beretta here. You can see the front view of her face. Boom. That's how it's going to look from the front. We know what it's going to look like from the three-quarter angle. So now we have got to do her up from the side because we don't yet know what she will look like when presented directly in the side view. So there's a lot of information that is being pushed into this character sheet that we are going to be able to use later on when it comes to redrawing her up. You can see also what her collar is going to look like from the side. This is important to work out. We didn't really know exactly how it was going to look before. These different views are kind of hidden from one another in some ways, and so we got to make sure that we are highlighting them, that we're shining a spotlight on exactly what each of these representations entail. Her hairdo is another very, very important design element that we have got to work out. How does its style appear from the direct side view, from the profile view? It's important. We got to know that because as you can see, it looks very, very different from the way in which it appears within the direct front view. So, be as comprehensive as possible. Be as detailed as you can when it comes to the way in which you're showing your character and the different visual descriptions that you're going to need to come up with in order to make sure that they are presented as accurately and as consistently as possible. Because again, this character is going to be drawn again and again, so a character sheet can come in very, very handy as you are doing that. So, this is the front view and the side view of Beretta's face, of her head, her hairstyle, the collar. And man, I gotta say, I love drawing female faces as much as I love drawing female figures. They're just, I like a beautiful woman, so drawing them is certainly something that I'm very open to, that I try to, as much as possible, get the opportunity to do. I like drawing all characters, as I said. I guess I look for the positive spin in every character I draw to make sure I'm motivated enough to fix it in the not fix it, but to draw it in the first place. But yeah, you got to find whatever element within your drawing you can use to motivate yourself to keep pushing forward. Because let me tell you, an 8-hour slog in order to complete a character sheet is quite a commitment. And as I said, that's exactly how much time I spent on Beretta's concept sheet here. So you got to make sure that you're engaged that your attention isn't going to wane too much, that you're not going to start procrastinating midway through. Look, I try to get these things done as fast as possible because I find that the longer I spend on something like this, the less motivated I am to do it, whether I'm drawing a female character or a male character. It doesn't matter what I'm drawing. If I spend too long on it, I'm going to start to get bored. It's going to get old. I'm not going to want to keep working on it. So I try to, while I've got as much creative energy there, while I've got all the amount of motivation I could possibly need in order to get started on this thing, I will try to use that as quickly as possible because that does run out eventually. And when it does, it can feel torturous to try and get an illustration or a concept done. So, at that point, if you do find that you become creatively fatigued on a piece that you've been working on for a substantial amount of time, you have got to find elements within it, things within it that keep you going, that keep you motivated, whether that be the notion of how it's going to look in the end and how epic it'll be. I often use that. I'm like, man, I've come so far. I'll look back at all the stuff I've done up until this point. I'll look at the 3/4 full body concept. I'll look at the head sketches and I'll be like, yes, this is good. All I've got to do is this side sketch and then the back view sketch and then, it'll be done. But just the fact that I'm looking back at what I've already completed and I like what I'm seeing, that pushes me forward. It helps me to keep on going. So it's important to do these side view representations and these back view representations of the character's full body as well, for the exact same reason as to why we want to take the time to do it for the head views, because things just look different in different perspectives, in different viewpoints. If you do not have a solid understanding of exactly how your character design looks from one point of view to the other, you are going to run into serious problems and have serious inconsistencies littered throughout the following drawings that you do of them within your comic book, or that your interior artist does of them. So the thing is when your reader looks at your characters within the comic book that they're reading, that you've created, they're going to get used to your character looking a certain way. They're going to get to know them. They're going to become familiar with them. And the more familiar they become with them, the more that they're probably going to like them, that they're going to become a fan of that character. But if you all of a sudden end up drawing them in a different way, even if you leave out a small element, the reader is going to notice immediately, because they now have an understanding of how that character is supposed to look. And if there's a difference there, if there's an inconsistency that ends up coming about because you accidentally left something out or you drew it in a different way to the way in which it was supposed to be drawn, there's going to be a massive disconnect there for the reader. They're not going to like that. They are going to realize that, oh, wait a second, I'm reading a comic book here. The suspense of disbelief is going to be broken. Instead of seeing your character and getting engaged with your character, they're just going to see an inaccurate drawing of that character. And that is not something that we want. We want at all times our reader to be as immersed as possible within the book that they are reading, the book that we have put all this time into creating for them. So now that the side is done, the puzzle pieces are falling together for this character. Slowly but surely, we are getting a more wholesome idea of who they are going to be and what they're going to look like in a visual sense. Now, the final piece of the puzzle is to figure out, well, how is she going to look from the back? How will Beretta's costume fit together in the back view? And this is something that is important as well. As I said, when you're looking at her from the front 3/4 and even the side angle, there's just no telling how that character will look from the back. And there will very likely be situations throughout the comic book when she must be drawn in this viewpoint. So we got to have that reference there that tells us exactly what we are going to be looking at when she's presented from that particular viewpoint. And so, I'm thinking about, well, how does that, the vest being and the pouches at the front being the primary, most prominent costume asset that we've got wrapping around her, how does that look from the back? How is it strapped on there? and what does it connect to from behind. And you can see that I've got the, those two straps that run down the front of her pelvis. I thought about, how would they end up coming up from behind? I had two options. I could have them merge into one that came up the back of her backside there in one strap, or I could divide them into two. I'm still not sure if I'm going to opt with option A or option B, but for now I have gone with the single strap that wraps around from the underside of her pelvis and up into the back of that vest. And, it kind of keeps everything together. I'm trying to, at all times, make sure that I have made it look as though this costume that I've got her wearing is going to stay on, that it is secure. Again, there are certain elements that do need to have practicality considered when it comes to designing a character, but there's others where you can get away. There's a little bit of leeway actually with the way in which you can go about putting a character together. And again, that coolness comes into it. Never sacrifice coolness for practicality. It's very, very important to keep in mind for comic book characters, especially. If you're creating a realistic concept for maybe a movie or something, okay, maybe practicality does need to be considered there a little bit more. But hey, man, this is all fantasy. This isn't supposed to be real. A lot of unrealistic things are going to happen within the story of this book. What a fantastic thing. So, inherently comic books are unrealistic anyway. I'll just make it look as though it could work. In this case, I'm trying to make it look as though those pouches are secured to Beretta's body. You can see there that I've tried to create I am going to try to create a translucent overlay of hair at the back so that while we're looking at how her hair is styled from behind, we are still able to see the underlying costuming from the back view as well. It's a nice little mix of the two. We want to be incorporating as much information as we possibly can into a character sheet in that regard. So, I'm thinking about all the different things that do need to be thought about, that do need to be considered here for Beretta's design. I just love the way that she came together. I think that she is a fantastic looking character. Again, she's highly trained. She's a cool chick, confident, knows how to look after herself. She's got a little bit of wit. She's a caring character, though. Like in the actual comic book, which I've already sketched out the thumbnails for, all 45 pages, they're all sorted. We're ready to go. We're ready to jump into production as soon as these character designs are complete. And, in the comic book, she is presented as a caring character. She's a tough chick. She doesn't suffer fools or weaklings very easily, but she can understand the fear that some of her comrades might feel in the face of, entering a mission, a deadly mission to retrieve their buddy from the alien assholes that have stolen him, that are doing the damned experiments on the guy. So, it's going to be a scary situation that these human rebels are faced with within the first issue of Renegade Alpha. But that just about pretty much wraps up Beretta's character concept design here. I really do hope that you enjoyed it, that you took away a ton of value from watching this demonstration. A lot of people loved how this character looked, how she came together, and the artistic representation of her design that I ultimately wound out with. So I thank you for all the feedback that I have received on this character concept. If you're watching this video, please let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. I'd love to hear them. And until next time, keep on creating, keep on drawing. If you'd like more comic art tips, tricks, and tutorials, be sure to visit www.howtodrawcomics.net. Over on the site, you'll find a bunch of written tutorials, video tutorials. Heck, we even got a podcast. And then when you're ready to delve deeper into the art of comic book illustration and take your skill set to the next level, be sure to check out our premium selection of courses in the How to Draw Comics store. Alright, that's it for today. I'll see you next time.